Say Metro by T-Mobile got the best deal in wireless, and it's all for you, all for me. Just switch quickly, because Metro has 2 lines for $80 and 2 Samsung Galaxy J7 Star phones for free, plus Amazon Prime included. That's the way wireless should be, only at Metro.
Plus sales tax and activation fee. $50 plus rate plan required. Not valid for numbers currently on T-Mobile network or on Metro in past 90 days. Offer subject to change. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Amazon Prime has a $12.99 per month value. Restrictions apply. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Prepare for glory!
I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. You can find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter. You can find me at SportsFanaticMB on Twitter. And, of course, you can find my co-host, Mr. Dennis Bennett, at Culture_Coach on Twitter. You can find our podcast as well as many other really good, awesome podcasts ranging from all kinds of awesome daily content to IDP content to redraft, dynasty, you name it, we got it all at fulltimefantasy.com, where you can find guys like Jim Day of FF Champs, Adam Ronis, and Dr. Roto, both who are on Sirius XM Radio and the FNTSY network. Bob Lung of the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, Anthony Servino of FF Face Off, and many others. Super awesome network, and because of them, again, the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, we will be at the Fantasy Football World Championship September 5th through 8th in Las Vegas, baby.
Gentlemen, welcome to Las Vegas. Is that right? Everybody eating? Good. Everybody sober?
Remember, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Except for herpes. That shit'll come back with you.
Some guys just can't handle Vegas.
That's right, Las Vegas. We will be at the Palms Resort in Las Vegas on September 6th and 7th. We will be recording live from Radio Row, talking about all things drafts. The Thursday night opening game will have already just happened, so we'll likely break that down. Do some previews for, obviously, the first week of the NFL season for all the Sunday and the Monday night games coming up that week. And then all kinds of drafts, content from the Fantasy Football World Championships where some of the best players in the world go play. We will be doing some live Twitter stuff and Facebook stuff as well. Cannot wait to get down there and do that. Should be a whole lot of fun. For today's episode, we will be talking about quarterbacks. That's right, we're finally here. It is time to do rankings. So we are going to do our preseason rankings on quarterbacks. We're going to do our top 24 for all of you that are super flex players, something I've really gotten into lately as well. We will break down our top 24. We'll go back and forth as always. Dennis starting it off first, then me, till we get down to our number one quarterbacks. Interested to see how this all works out, as neither one of us have seen each other's list. But we can't do that without Dennis, so let's get Dennis on here so we can start breaking down our top 24 quarterbacks for the 2019 season.
Hello!
Dennis, what's going on, man?
You know what? I am having a fantastic day. Just received the email. My flight for Vegas and the Fantasy Football World Championships is officially booked. I'm going to be arriving about noon on the 5th, so I'll have plenty of time to get checked in and get to the Fantasy Football World Champion pregame Thursday night kickoff festivities. I'm pretty psyched.
There you go. That is awesome. We got to get you to live draft, or not live draft, I'm sorry. You got to do something live from Twitter from there, because as and obviously the listeners were not part of our little conference call we got to do with Jim Day the other day, but he was talking about how awesome of an experience that is. So maybe, if there's a lot of risque stuff going on up in the old Playboy suite, which I found was very interesting to find out that's what that was. Don't air any of that stuff out there, but just kind of what it's like, and like I've told the listeners before, and I know we've talked about it, we'll definitely get your thoughts and just takeaways from that first night, since I won't be able to be there when we record live on Friday, because I imagine it's gonna be a good time, man. I'm super excited and cannot wait to get there.
I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was gonna save this for later, but why don't we go ahead and talk about the Midwest Expo? Because what I was gonna say is, I keep seeing all the stuff and everybody that's going to be there on Twitter, and I'm not going to lie, I'm really getting bummed out that I'm not going to be able to be there, because this sounds awesome. So since you are going to be there, tell everybody, just the huge gathering of great fantasy analysts that are going to be up for the Midwest Fantasy Expo in Ohio this year, and just kind of what it's going to entail.
Man, it is going to be something. We have Dynasty Nerds, Football Diehards, the Fantasy Footballers, the Back Row Fantasy Show, RotoViz, Fighting Chance Fantasy, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. We can't forget Bob. He's the host of the whole event. Just 30 or 40 different booths with podcasts. FF Statistics is going to be there. Clipcast is going to be there. So if you want to come and get some inside information, some advice for your upcoming season and drafts, August 18th at the Canton Cultural Center for the Arts in Canton, Ohio, August 18th from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then at Fathead's Brewery afterwards, Dynasty Nerds might be throwing a little soiree if you want to swing by there and shake some hands and kiss some babies. Probably no babies at the brewery, but
you never know. Or maybe shake the babies and kiss the hands. However you want to do it. Everybody's different. You don't have to, form to one format of society wants you to do. But anyways, it sounds like it's gonna be awesome. I know that Bob is wanting to make this a yearly thing, so I have already gotten stuff in the works to make sure I'm there next year, because obviously the Vegas thing kind of hit us late, and so we had both planned on being there for the Midwest Fantasy Expo, but then when this came up, going to Vegas is just kind of hard to pass up, especially for something like this, because I've never been to like a Fantasy Football World Championships or anything like that, so I imagine it's just going to be so much fun. I was like, I can only do one this year, so that's where I'm going to go, but Dennis, like I said, he'll be there with all those other great guests. He'll have some swag. I just sent him today some of the stuff that's coming up in our shop that hopefully should be open soon. He'll have a bunch of that stuff for free to give away from listeners, along with a bunch of other stuff, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you guys are going to be in the area, I would definitely check that out, and then make sure to post all kinds of pictures and tag me to make me even more jealous and upset that I can't make it.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe last minute you'll give in and talk to the wife, and she'll be like, Matt, I know how hard you've been working at this, and I see how passionate you are about it.
Well,
let's do a quick hitter and get you up there.
Now, the wife's not the one that has a problem with me going. I've just got so much stuff going on in the next month, because I'm an idiot and I keep accepting invitations into other leagues, and I've got 6 live drafts I have to plan down here. There's that. I've got obviously the Vegas stuff. There's a bunch of stuff I've got coming up for work that I have to get ready for as well. And so it's just kind of trying to cram everything into one schedule is making it not easy for me to be able to do both. But who knows? I won't count it out yet until 12 o'clock rolls around on that Sunday, and I'm not there, that I won't be there. All right. So let's talk about...
it'll be fun. We'll miss you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you guys will. I'll be forgotten about within a few seconds. But that's all right. I would love to be like a fly on somebody's beer there, listening to the conversations that are going on. Like I said, you're going to get to meet all the people that we've kind of, grown these relationships with over this past year, just based on this podcast that I've truly admire, and I've only met through Twitter and the podcast that I've never gotten to meet. So to be able to meet guys like Jared and Garrett, I know Bark and Arms are going to be there. It's going to be awesome. Like I said, hopefully next year all those guys will be back, and I'll be able to get up there, and it'll be cool to finally get to meet everybody and hang out.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
All right, so before we jump in and start talking about the cornerbacks, let's talk about some of the breaking news that has happened since we last recorded. Let's start with the first story that came out late last night, in that Mike Daniels was released from the Green Bay Packers. I was about to say exciting because I'm a Browns fan, but I was shocked by this. This is one of those, you get a couple of these every year where a cut happens on a team and you're like, wow, I can't believe that person just got cut. He's likely going to end up on a team very quickly. Before the news came out today that he is actually visiting the Browns tomorrow, I believe. I actually thought he'd be like a perfect fit for the Indianapolis Colts. I cannot wait to see who lands him, even though he is almost 30 years old, or is 30 years old. I still think he has a chance to be a very good and productive defensive player. He's one of the best defensive players last year. So your thought, before the injury, obviously, what are your thoughts on Mike Daniels getting released, and do you have a preference, or do you think he's going to go to a certain team?
I'm not sure where he's going to go. I feel like he's still good enough that he'll be able to pick the best opportunity to make the playoffs and go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah.
So if he's smart, he looks at scheme fit and he looks at playoff potential. The Packers see him every day, so they know how he is in practice. They know, and while I'm not trying to intimate that they are saying that there's something wrong with him or anything. I just feel like they're looking at it and going, for where we're going, does a 30-year-old defensive tackle coming off an injury or defensive end coming off an injury, does that really work for where we're at and where we're going? And so, while it's a little surprising, I'll admit, I do think that, the business side of the NFL is brutal.
Yeah.
And so, while it surprises me that he was cut, it doesn't surprise me that an NFL team said, you're 30 years old, you're coming off an injury, we don't want to take the risk that you're going to be worth what your contract says, so we're just going to get rid of you.
Yeah, I think that's more it than him not being productive. I do think it was more a business move. I did hear Adam Schefter talk about that earlier this morning, actually, that they've been trying to move him for the past 2 weeks, but that once other teams got wind that they were trying to trade him, they're like, no, if you're likely trying to trade him, you're likely going to cut him, so we're just going to wait. And so nobody bit, nobody offered anything for him. So now he's out there on the free agency market. Like I said, I thought Indianapolis would be a great fit. They could use someone like him on the defensive line, and then add in the fact that they really didn't do much with their cap space that they already had, which was one of the top. I think they were right there in the top 3 of available cap space when the offseason started. To have all that cap space and now be able to add a guy like that onto the defensive front would be amazing. Again, he is meeting with the Cleveland Browns tomorrow. If he landed in Cleveland, my goodness, that defensive line would just get 10 times more scarier. I would love it. I do think a lot of it is just due to his connections with Dorsey and Wolf and Christ, who are all there. Most of those guys coming from the Green Bay Packers. I believe Wolf and Christ were actually 2 of the guys there that drafted him in Green Bay, so they have that connection there. I don't know if he's actually going to sign with Cleveland. I'd love it. But that's just the only team that I've seen it reported that he's meeting with right now. But I do know there was a tweet out there earlier today, I think by Adam Schefter as well, that said at least 11 teams have already contacted Daniels to see if he has any interest in playing with them. So he's going to be highly sought after, and I agree with you. He's likely going to pick a team that's going to, or at least looks as of right now, going to make a deep playoff run, possible Super Bowl run, so that he can get himself another ring. Next up, we have Kevin Byard of the Tennessee Titans. He got paid a huge contract. Deion Sanders likely knows who he is now. If you guys don't know that story, I think it was last year, right? He released the top quarterbacks, and Kevin Byard wasn't on there. He's like, you forgot me, and Deion thought he was just somebody else. Had no idea that dude played in the NFL. I can't remember what his response back was, but it was pretty funny. So I imagine Deion Sanders knows who he is now. Great for him. Glad that he got paid. He is by far one of the best cornerbacks in the league. I would imagine if you play in IDP leagues, he's likely already rostered on any teams that you play, or any IDP leagues that you play in. Not sure how much is going to help out Tennessee because we're about to get to a story here about how bad their offense might be, at least for the first 4 games. But do you have any thoughts on Byard getting the bag here?
Byard is a playmaking safety. He had 4 interceptions in 2018 and 8 interceptions in 2017. And he's put up 87 and 90 tackles, combined tackles, each of the last 2 seasons. So from an IDP perspective, he's definitely a guy that if you're having to start defensive backs, he's one of the guys you're trying to get. Their defense needs to play well, especially now with the offensive line situation. So I like Byard. I think he's one of the better safeties in the league, and he's getting paid like one. So now it's time for him to produce for another 2, 3, 4 years to show that he was worth all that money.
Yeah, and then speaking again on the offensive side here for Tennessee, Taylor Lewan is likely going to be suspended for 4 games. It is not for sure yet, as he tested positive for a PED. That was the A sample from everything I've been reading. They do have to wait for the B sample to come back, and if it matches, he will be suspended for 4 games. He did put out a... I think it was like a video recording.
A video or something, yeah.
A video
I didn't watch it yet.
But him apologizing to his teammates and saying that he did not knowingly take it. He then provided a polygraph test showing that he was telling the truth on that he did not knowingly take it. But I don't think that really matters in the NFL's eyes. That's not that I'm saying he's using an excuse, but that has been said before, and it hasn't really regarded it anything except for them still getting suspended. So until the B sample comes back, we don't know for sure, but it does look like he will be suspended for 4 games. That is tough. They have 2 division games, and then obviously they play the Cleveland Browns in the opening game. Not easy games that he's going to miss. You already have Marcus Mariota in a contract year with a shaky offensive line. Now you take out his left tackle. I think that's bad news for Mariota and Derrick Henry, at least to start the year, because I don't think they have anyone that's going to be a viable replacement to put over there. You have anything you want to add on that?
No, it sounded like a decent end.
All right. Next up, so Zeke Elliott did not join the team on the way to their off-season camp. We'll see what happens. The report came out later, I think in Oxnard, California. He did not get on the plane. A report came out about an hour after that saying that he still might join them eventually, but I guess this is still part of his holdout. Not surprising. We kind of all saw this coming. I don't think he's going to pull Le'Veon Bell because he's still under contract for 2 more years, where Le'Veon Bell was not going to be. So he's going to have to show up eventually. When he shows up, I don't know. Obviously, the bad news with something like that is a lot of times we see when players hold out a long time and then come back late. If it's week 2 or week 3 of the preseason, they start off a little bit slower and they're more susceptible to soft tissue injuries just because they're trying to get back up and caught up with everybody else. So that does worry me a little bit about Zeke, and we will throw Michael Thomas in there as well, as he is not with the team, which was surprising to me. We did hear that he wanted a new contract, but it seemed like everything we were hearing from both sides is that they were working on it, and they were both in good conscience, in good faith working on it, and both happy with what was going on. But he is not with the team either, so we'll see what happens. Those 2 are definitely stories to watch, as those are top 3 players at their positions. At least if you want to go a little bit deeper with Thomas, 4 or 5, I think he's in the top 3. So top 3 players at their positions right now for fantasy. So that's a big blow. Your thoughts on the holdouts here in Zeke and Thomas?
Yeah, with Zeke, he needs to get in camp by August 6th. So, maybe he takes a couple more weeks off just to try to push the situation. But if he doesn't get in camp, then he ends up his contract told, so it doesn't do him any good getting him closer to free agency. So Zeke, I'm pretty confident will be in. He's just, being Zeke and taking it easy a little bit. I think Michael Thomas is another story, though. I think he was, it kind of caught people by surprise because it seemed like they were working in good faith towards a new contract. So it wouldn't surprise me if Michael Thomas ends up being just a couple days to, prove a point. Hey, I'll really do this if I have to, kind of thing. Now let's get back in there and get back to work so I can play some football.
Yeah.
I don't. We've been wrong with Le'Veon Bell. A lot of people felt like he wasn't going to sit out. So, we'll see. It always makes you a little bit nervous. Both of them, like you said, are top of their position players. It ends up, it hurts their teams and shows how valuable they are to what their team is doing. But ultimately, it hurts them as well. So the sooner they get in, the better.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say lastly, was that it's just something to monitor right now. Obviously Le'Veon Bell kind of shocked the world for all of us last year, really the entire season, because I was just talking about this with someone actually earlier today, and that nobody thought that was going to happen. I mean, it seemed like every other week you were getting reports that Le'Veon Bell was saying, oh, I'll be back in this week, or I'll be back in this week, and then when it finally just didn't happen, we were all kind of like, holy crap, that actually happened. He's going to sit the whole year, so none of us were expecting that again. Neither one of us think either one of these guys are going to do that, but we really just don't know at this point. So we are just going to monitor it, and as it progresses, if they continue to sit out, we'll discuss that for now. But I don't think this should change their values at all for anything. Last but not least, this came out just about an hour ago. Sterling Shepard fractured his thumb in practice. Not a huge deal. He will be evaluated on a week-to-week basis, but as everything is reporting right now, it's early enough that this shouldn't be a huge hit to his fantasy stock for the season. So I'm not too worried about it, unless obviously this lingers on, which it might. Again, obviously a wide receiver is using their hands frequently and throughout the entire game, so having that, if there's any kind of re-injury to it, obviously that's going to hurt his season. But for now, with the fact that it is so early, I mean, we're still a couple weeks away from the first preseason game. I'm not too worried about Sterling Shepard and his value. I still think Golden Tate's going to be the one there anyways, being the slot wide receiver and probably the check down guy for Manning with Barkley. So I'm not too worried about it for Shepard, but he did fracture his thumb. Are you more worried about it than I am, Dennis, or you just kind of, it is what it is kind of deal right now?
Well, I felt like he was going to probably lead the team in catches. I like Golden Tate, but Shepard is he's an underrated receiver in my opinion, and I felt like he was going to be a little more versatile than Golden Tate. So maybe this opens up a door in the preseason for Corey Coleman to find his way and get a little more playing time and show why he was a high draft pick. So I don't know. It's a shame because this was really this is the year that Shepard has to show really what he is. Is he just a character actor? He's always, when awards are handed out, the best he can hope for is the best supporting actor. Or is he, this was the year he could show he could be the leading man. And starting off the postseason with a broken thumb, or the preseason, with a broken thumb, that's going to keep him out till basically the first week of the season. It's kind of not the way you want to go about showing your leading man material.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So let's that pretty much wraps up our breaking news segment right there for what we've got today.
It's my team. It's my quarterback.
All right. So as I mentioned in the intro, we're doing our quarterbacks today. Top 24 for all of you who play in Superflex for the preseason. This will likely change before the season gets here, as hopefully not, but chances are we'll get at least one injury or something that'll happen to change the way that these guys are ranked. Dennis, I'm going to let you go first. What I'd like, before you give, we'll go back and forth like we always do. So you do your 24, I'll give you my 24. But I'd like you to give how you decided upon your ranks. I don't know if we did it the same way, so I'd like you to tell the listeners how you came upon ranking your 24 through 1, and then go ahead and kick it off with your 24th ranked running back quarterback.
Well, so we're looking at it from a redraft perspective, correct?
Yes, that's the way that I'm looking at it for sure.
These aren't dynasty rankings?
Not going to do dynasty right now. Yeah, all redraft stuff right now. Yeah, redraft
Hello?
stuff. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
My bad. Yeah, all redraft stuff. So we're not going to do. We'll focus on Dynasty here in the coming weeks, but right now we just want to focus on redraft for the preseason. How you're ranking your guys?
Right. That's. I just wanted to make sure because that was how I was looking at it and sort of how I went about it. So coming in at 24 for me this year, I'm going to roll in with Derek Carr. Like I just mentioned, this is redraft, so I'm looking to see who's going to have what kind of season this year. And I think Carr is going to have a pretty good season, but I think ultimately he comes in at 24 instead of being higher because I think he has limitations. There's going to be he's not terribly mobile, so he's not going to have a big rushing floor. Historically, John Gruden targets his number one receiver about 27% of the time. And while Antonio Brown is the number one receiver, which is good, I don't know if that's good for Derek Carr to kind of have a scheme that's locked into just one receiver. They've got a lot of question marks at tight end. Tyrell Williams isn't adequate too. There's a little bit of question about what their depth is. Josh Jacobs is the running back. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people. I do think he'll be a fairly competent receiving back, but if all the Raiders are doing is throwing the ball, then that gets their game script off, and it allows the defense to tee off on them. So I went with Derek Carr thinking, we went top 24 instead of top 12 because with the proliferation of super flex leagues, I think there is a great opportunity for Derek Carr to be a relevant quarterback. Maybe he ends up being a matchup quarterback with somebody like Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, or Marcus Mariota, and you have two of them, and you're playing matchups there. So that was where I'm at. Derek Carr is my number 24.
Gotcha. So for me, I pretty much based my rankings on the players around them and then how I think they're going to handle the year. For me, my 24 is Andy Dalton. He finished last year with about 276 points in fantasy. I think he's going to have a decent year this year. Obviously, we don't know what the offense is going to look like. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong thing. We don't know what the offense is going to look like with Zach Taylor there now, the new head coach. Obviously, they just signed Tyler Boyd to a new deal. A.J. Green is in his contract here. A lot of people are hoping for good things for Joe Mixon. Obviously, the early injury to the offensive line is not going to help Cincinnati any. But I do think that Andy Dalton still has a serviceable year that puts him into that top 24. All right, so already we're starting off with two differences. I'm liking where this is going so far. So you've got Derek Carr, I've got Andy Dalton. Who is your 23rd ranked quarterback for the 2019 season?
I struggled with this because in fantasy, from the quarterback position, lately with the advent of the athletic quarterback, the mantra is high rushing floor. But a high rushing floor isn't going to do you a whole heck of a lot of good if you're a terrible passer and you play in an offense that could likely rush the ball 600 times this year. That might be an exaggeration there, but I have Lamar Jackson at 23. I believe he's going to make some strides in the passing game. But man, last year he showed that he had a long way to go. And yeah, he looked good running the ball, but I just don't think you can survive in the NFL as a quarterback if you're running the ball 20 times a game. 10 times a game is probably stretching it. So I do have him at 23. I do feel like with the aforementioned rushing floor and the growth that I think there will be in his passing game, I don't think he's going to turn into Drew Brees this preseason, but I do think that he's going to be better than he was last year. He's been working on it. He's been working in the offense now for a year. And so I'm going to give him an opportunity to upside surprise me, but he is my number 23 quarterback there, Lamar Jackson.
All right, for me, my 23 is Derek Carr. So he finished 18th last year with 350 points. Again, they added Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams. They did lose Jared Cook, though, which I thought was kind of a big blow to them there at the tight end position. Obviously, getting Josh Jacobs at running back as well, whatever you want to think about him, he's considered to be a very good and highly rated prospect. So they've built some offensive weapons around Derek Carr. I think he's going to have a good year. I've got him going for just a little bit under 4,000 yards, around 21 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. I think he's going to have a good year, but again, with quarterback, it's hard to say that because I just said I have him as my 23rd ranked quarterback, and you're like, oh man, you gotta, that's not that good. But quarterback is so deep, like you could almost. There's a lot of these guys I have that are separated by like 5 to 10 points. So you're looking at almost 2 touchdowns or a couple interceptions here or there could change everything. So I do think Derek Carr is going to have a decent year here all around, but I do have him as my 23rd ranked quarterback. Dennis, who do you have at 22?
At 22, I have the esteemed veteran out of Purdue playing for the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees.
Wow. Okay.
What's that?
I was saying wow. I was just wow. I didn't think you dropped that far down, but okay. Go ahead, give it to me. Why do you have him down all the way down to 22?
Well, their pass catching core is Michael Thomas and a bunch of question marks. They've got Kamara, but we have to see what's going to happen. Is Kamara? Can he really carry a full load? Are they going to put Lat Murray in the same role that Ingram was in? And he was down in attempts last year, and I think as they get up towards 41, 42, 43 years old, they have to be a little craftier with what they do, and you can't drop back 600 times, and because you're going to take some hits, and it's not. Drew doesn't have Ben Roethlisberger size. Drew is 6 foot and 215. He's not Ben at 6'5" and 245. So I think that he's going to be a much better NFL quarterback as he finishes out his career than fantasy quarterback. And so will he have some big games? I think so, but I don't think he's going to be consistent because they are going to have a good running game. Their defense is getting better, and so they're likely to be in some closer games. They're not going to be in shootouts on a frequent basis, I don't think. And so I think it just his opportunity is going to end up being a little more limited.
Okay. Interesting. I don't have him anywhere near here, so that'll be interesting to see how the rest of this shakes out. For me, my 22 is Lamar Jackson, so we're kind of just missing each other here on a couple of these guys. And I agree with everything you say. Really, the only reason I had him here and not lower is because of the floor and rushing. I think he's going to get a decent amount of rushing attempts. I mean, obviously, I don't think that's ideal for him, but he's just a versatile athlete that I think that he's going to do it. Whether they want him to or not, I do think that he needs to improve on throwing the ball. I know there's a lot of talk about how he has done that. I just need to see it first, man. I can't believe it. As bad as he was last year, I can't imagine he made that big a stride already in 1 year. I'm not saying that he can't do it eventually, but I think 1 year is just not going to be enough. So I've got him right there at 22 for me, and he finished 32 last year with 207.9 points. Again, though, didn't really take over the starting job till I think it was week 11 or 12 after the Joe Flacco injury in the bye week. So not obviously didn't play a full season, but still put up some pretty decent points with 200 points in last year's season. Who's your 21?
My 21, it hurts me to my core. I've got Matthew Stafford at 21.
Okay.
And I like Stafford's talent, and I think he's kind of one of those guys that if they let him, he'd throw the ball 50 times a game. He has the mentality that he'd be okay being a gunslinger. But I don't know that Matt Patricia and Darrell Bevell are going to run the offense that way. Patricia was already going away from a wide open offense last year, and bringing in Darrell Bevell, who is a fairly conservative, run-oriented offensive coordinator who has Kerryon Johnson at his disposal. I think Kerryon Johnson is an excellent running back, and I think Johnson is going to get all he can handle. And so I think the person that loses in this change in offensive philosophy is going to be Stafford. I don't think it affects Galladay quite as much, because I think Galladay is going to still be the number one target, and so he'll be the target hog. Marvin Jones will still get, wide receiver 2 targets, but it's going to affect the balance of the receivers across the board, and Stafford and the number of passes that he's going to throw. So I expect him to take a drop this year.
All right, so for me, mine's going to be Mitchell Biscuits. Mitchell Trubisky actually had a very good year last year, finished as a 15th quarterback with 383 points. And again, I don't think he takes a huge step backwards here. I still think he's going to have a decent amount of yardage. He's going to rush the ball, I would imagine. What did he have last year? I think 400 yards rushing. So I think he's going to come in 420 yards rushing. I think he's going to come in right around that, probably right around 390 to 400 yards rushing still. I just don't. I think that defense is still going to be good. That I imagine they're not going to get in any kind of shootouts, which will allow him to put up more points. I think that Matt Nagy is going to rely more on the run now when he's got a guy like David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen there in the backfield who can really kind of mix it up with Montgomery. So I do think that they're going to lean heavier on the run game, especially in the wintertime when it starts getting cold up north. Run game defense is the way those teams usually play. I imagine that's the way it's going to go for Mitchell Trubisky. So I see him dropping a little bit in my rankings all the way down to 21. Dennis, who you got at 20?
At 20, I have Sam Darnold.
Man, we're just not.
I think
we're not matching up at all. This is crazy.
Adam Gase is just a fuckstick, man. I got to be honest. I'm completely guessing with Darnold.
Yeah.
I don't know what Adam Gase is going to do. Gase could go in there and completely destroy Le'Veon Bell by not giving him the ball and only throwing him a few passes and letting Darnold sling it all over the field. Or Gase could go in and he could run a conservative offense because he has one of the top running backs in the game. And so it's a lot of handoff and a lot of swing passes and not a lot of stuff down the field. They've lost Herndon for 4 games. And while there's some potential with the receivers in Anderson, Enunwa, and Crowder, none of them have been consistent over the course of an entire season. Well, I take that back. Crowder has been consistent over the course of an entire season, but that's been about 3 years ago. Since then, he's been battling injuries, and now we're in a situation where I want Darnold to have a good year because I own some shares of Robbie Anderson and Quincy Enunwa. and especially Chris Herndon. So I want I want the Jets to be a passing offense, but I just don't know what Adam Gase is going to do. And so that kind of puts me down thinking when I look at, Roethlisberger and Josh Allen and Dak and Rivers and Goff, and I'm like, am I comfortable putting Darnold over a lot of these guys? And the answer is no. Is it within the range of outcomes that Darnold finishes, 12, 13, 14? Oh yeah, it's very reasonable, but I have to put him somewhere, and 20 is where he landed.
Yeah, I hear you. In all honesty, I don't have him ranked in my top 24, just based on that. And when we get to the running backs in the next episode, because I've already started ranking mine out, Le'Veon Bell is actually pretty low for me as well on that, because I'm right there with you. I just don't know what to think of Adam Gase. Darnold did not even make my top 24. At 20 for me, I got Jimmy GQ. I am a little bit worried about him. I know a lot of people love him based on what they've seen in limited flashes. And that's the problem. We've only seen it in limited amounts. If you really go back and look at his stats, they're not as stellar as a lot of people think they are. He's got a lot of games where he only throws like one touchdown. And there's very few where there's like a handful he's thrown two. And you need to throw multiple touchdowns to be productive in fantasy. I do think that that's going to happen if he can stay healthy all year. Again, in Kyle Shanahan's offense, they've got a ton of weapons around him now. A loaded backfield with Coleman, McKinnon, and Breida. You got George Kittle, Dante Pettis, Deebo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin, among others. I can't even think of some of the other guys right now, but they're loaded. So I do think if Garoppolo can stay healthy, he is going to kind of actually put up some decent numbers this year. So I got him right there at 20. We are now into the teens. Dennis, who you got at 19?
Well, at 19 is where I'm trying to project, and I'll compare my number 19 quarterback, which is Kyler Murray, to Lamar Jackson. So they both kind of have that perception of being very mobile, gonna run, high rushing floor. The difference for me is that Baltimore is going to be a run-first offense, and Arizona is going to be a throw-first offense. Arizona's already running a lot of 3 and 4 wide receivers. Ricky Seals-Jones is their starting tight end, who's a former wide receiver who will be split out in the slot frequently. David Johnson, we've all seen how well he can catch the ball. And so the potential is there for Murray to be able to throw more. I think his floor. I feel like they're gonna want to rein in his running a little bit, in part just because he's not real big, and so they're gonna have to pull back to keep him healthy. But he's gonna be in a throwing offense, and it's gonna just depend on how does he mature as an NFL quarterback. So I'm going with Kyler Murray as my number 19 quarterback next year.
I am not going to lie. I am proud of you for having him at least that high. I really did not think he was going to make your top 24. So that's good to hear, because I actually don't have him that far off of where you have him right now. For me, my number 19 is Dak Prescott. I know a lot of people are going to say this is cowboy haterism because he's finished right around the 15 to 10 mark every single year so far. I just don't.
Well, they'd be right.
No, they wouldn't. The only reason, and I say this in true, I do think Dak is going to have a good year. He has proven that he can do it. I just don't think he's an elite quarterback like others do. Obviously, he brings the rushing game in, which is awesome. That nowadays, quarterbacks who bring you that obviously are just a step above everybody else. Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson. Carson Wentz does it a little bit. We'll see what Kyler Murray can bring to that game. Baker Mayfield does a little bit of that, but not as much. You need those guys to do it because you have guys, I'll compare Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady, two of the best quarterbacks in the game probably. Phillip Rivers doesn't run at all, and so even though he's putting up all kinds of crazy NFL numbers, he doesn't put up those fantasy numbers because you don't get those rushing yards. Now, Tom Brady doesn't do it either, but Tom Brady's just putting up even better, mostly because of the touchdowns that he throws in the high-powered New England offenses. He does get some rushing touchdowns every year when he does the goal line sneaks that help as well. But those guys, because of their rushing floor, I think kind of hurt themselves a little bit in fantasy. Dak has a good team around him, and I imagine they're going to continue to rely on Zeke. And that's, I think, is part of it. The other part is I just don't know what this offense is going to be. New offensive coordinator. I don't know how much I want to trust Dak is going to be throwing the ball down the field. I do think that Amari Cooper is not going to be locked down completely, but locked up a little bit. We saw him come over and have a fantastic year last year with the Cowboys, which is very rare. It does not happen that often for wide receivers who are traded in the middle of the year. But it also now gave defenses an entire year now to watch that and see what they did with him. We don't know what Michael Gallup is going to be yet. We don't know if Randall Cobb is going to be anything close to what he was in Green Bay. So for me, all those questions combined, the only question I don't have is Zeke. Zeke's going to be good. We know that, but he doesn't have a tight end to go to either. Lost his little outlet guy in Cole Beasley. I know they brought back Jason Witten. They're not going to allow him to bring his walker onto the field. I don't think he's going to do much for him. I just don't. So Dak is going to fall down the ranks for me a little bit. Again, it's only 4 spots. I know he finished higher than 15 last year, but he's finished right around there the past couple of years. So I'm only dropping him a little bit. I still think he's going to have a fantastic year. But the new offensive coordinator and offensive scheme does worry me a little bit, enough to drop him in my ranks. And really, there's only 2 guys ahead of him, and I'll let you guys know when we get to him that I would think about moving up ahead of them. But for right now, he's going to fall at 19 for me. Who's your 18?
I'm going with Jameis Winston. I like Winston to, continue to throw the ball. I do think though that Winston is turnover prone. And he doesn't, he's got a very low rushing floor. I think he can get out of the pocket a little bit to avoid pressure. But I do think that he has a tendency to make mistakes. And if Tampa goes to a high volume throwing offense, because frankly they don't have much in the running back category. It's Mike Evans, it's Chris Godwin, it's O.J. Howard, it's Cameron Brate, and we'll see what happens at running back. So they're going to throw the ball, but I just think that he's going to run into issues with consistency, and making mistakes, and that's where I think is going to push him down. Now I could see Winston completely, looking like he has a better season than he does, buoyed by a couple 500-yard, 5-touchdown games. But I think overall, Winston, mid-range QB2. And, as I talk through this, I'm probably a little low on him. But as I look at the people in front of him, I'm not real comfortable moving him up. So I'm going with Winston.
I gotcha. Yeah, Winston was one of the harder guys for me to rank, and it seems like much like a lot of the guys here, I've got him a couple spots ahead of where you have him. For me at 18, it's Tom Brady. We've talked about this a lot throughout the offseason. I think their offensive game plan is going to change a little bit here. I think they are going to lean more run heavily. I think that's why they brought in Damian Harris. Obviously got Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead, just loaded in the backfield. I'm not as big a believer in N'Keal Harry. I think Julian Edelman is going to be solid in the wide receiver core, but I do think they're going to move more toward kind of what they were when Tom Brady first joined that team in defense and the run game. So I'm going to drop him down to 18. Still think he's going to have a fairly good year. Lately, he's been right around the 30 touchdown mark. I imagine he gets pretty close to that. Probably, what I have written down here is probably right around 4,200 yards, 27 touchdowns. So I think he's still going to have a really good season, just not as bad as or good as he has been here of late. I think he's going to slowly start to continue to fall backwards as he has the past couple of years. Who do you have at 17?
At 17, I've got Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like Garoppolo, while not being very consistent, he hasn't put up very good numbers because he's been injured. It's a team that's right now, they have a coaching staff that has shown in the past that they can run a scheme that's going to score some points. And so I'm betting on Kyle Shanahan because I think Garoppolo has the tools, and I think Deebo Samuel, Dante Pettis, Marquise Goodwin, I think these are all guys that are their game is gonna be elevated. George Kittle, if I forgot him, is a top tier tight end, and I think with their running backs, they've got a bunch of clones essentially that are capable inside runners, maybe not superstars, and capable pass catchers. So regardless of who's in the backfield, they can run whatever portion of their playbook that they want to. They don't really have to alter any of that. And so I'm going to bet on the coach and the coaching scheme, and Jimmy Garoppolo is coming in at 17 for me.
All right, and I did forget to mention it. Tom Brady is one of the guys that I might move behind Dak Prescott, as I was talking about. But for me at 17 is Kyler Murray. Much of what you talked about, I think he's got I don't want to say a very safe floor in rushing because I don't know how much he's going to do that at the NFL level. I think that's a common misconception on him. Kyler Murray did not run the ball as much as we thought he did in college football. He did that when he needed to. For the most part, he did a lot of what Baker Mayfield did, which was run around in the backfield and around the line of scrimmage to buy time to get the ball to someone down the field. But a lot of people saw what he was able to do at times, especially in the national championship game, and thought, oh, that's exactly what Kyler Murray, my goodness, I cannot talk. Kyler Murray does all the time. No, he just had guys like Quinnen Williams chasing him, and at that point, you might as well just try and get upfield, and he couldn't do that because Quinnen Williams is a monster. But I do think Kyler Murray has a good arm. He's moving and going to an offense that's going to work perfectly for him. My goodness, why did I just forget his name? Oh my God, I just feel like an idiot now. Head coach, Texas Tech. Why can't I remember his name? Dennis, help me out here. I've gone completely blank.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, okay, so Cliff Kingsbury, yeah, you're right, you got it. I don't know why. I hate to say this, I was just looking at something that Todd Monken said, and all of a sudden that's the only name I had in my head. I could not get it out of my head, but yes, Cliff Kingsbury. I think that's the perfect offensive coach and head coach for Kyler Murray. I love the team that they have around him weapons-wise. Don't necessarily love the offensive line there, but I do love the weapons they have around him. So I do think Kyler Murray is going to have a good year. I can actually see him ending up higher than 17, but right now I'm going to do like a safer projection and just put him right around 17 for me this year. Who do you have at 16?
I have the KG vet, Big Ben Roethlisberger at 16.
Wow. Man, you're dropping everybody in your rankings.
You know, I'm so there's Juju and there's AB, and and Le'Veon Bell. So you got the big three there, and they threw the ball quite a lot. You know, with Connor, they don't throw the ball quite as much to the back like they did when Bell was in there. AB left, and Juju has to step up. Vance McDonald, who I really like as a tight end, but frankly has a history of not staying healthy, and so there's a little bit of gamble there. James Washington, who I like as a prospect, but had a little bit of the drop season. I don't think he kind of came on quite like it was expected last year. They brought in Moncrief, and I got to be honest, I feel like if Moncrief was going to do it, Moncrief would have done it. And he's on his third team now, and he just hasn't broke out. Maybe he's the second coming of Brandon Lloyd, but I don't think so. And then we get down to Ryan Switzer and Deontay Johnson. So I feel like with Connor, with Benny Snell, with Jalen Samuels, I feel like they're going to slow the offense down and run some more. Put a little effort into the defense and try to keep the games a little bit closer so they're not having to play catch up. So I think it comes down to volume with Ben, and I think he's going to end up dropping down just because they're not getting the volume in the passing game.
All right, so my number 16 is Phillip Rivers. So last year he finished as the 11th quarterback with 435 points. Again, I think he's going to have a fairly decent year. Did lose Tyrell Williams, which is not necessarily a huge weapon for him, especially if you believe Mike Williams is going to be able to step up into that role. May outproduce Tyrell Williams, but Tyrell Williams was a decent deep threat for him at times. In that offense. Obviously, he is getting Hunter Henry back as well, so he should have a lot of good weapons around him. We'll see what happens with Melvin Gordon. We obviously don't know yet. The reports seem to be that those two are very far off from their contract talks. Now, still has Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson there, though, to step up into that. I think he's going to have somewhere close to like 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, so I think he's going to have a good year. Not a bad year at all. I like the weapons and the team around him altogether. I think they are Super Bowl contenders, but I have him right down there at 16 for me. He was the other guy that I might move Dak Prescott ahead of at some point, but that's it at that point. So the highest I would have him is 16. So again, not that far off that top 15 quarterbacks. And now we're jumping into our top 15. Dennis, who do you have right there at 15?
Well, I'm going with the big gunslinger out of Wyoming and Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills.
We finally matched on somebody. All right. Let's go.
So, Allen has that rushing floor, and he's got Ben Roethlisberger's size. So while I'll forever be frustrated with Josh Allen's lack of accuracy, I imagine, I think he's in a great position to grow with a pretty young team and take a step forward this year. I think he's going to have a decent year. I think top 15 is pretty good for your second year when it comes to fantasy points. They've got question marks at every other skill position. I don't know that Devin Singletary is the answer at running back. Frank Gore and Shady McCoy are combined 641 years old. TJ Yeldon has shown that he's a satellite back, and that's it. Their tight end room is a veritable who the hell is that? Dawson Knox, Jason Kroom, Tyler Croft, combination of who's that injuries and rookies. And then wide receiver, they need somebody to step up. They brought in Cole Beasley, but Beasley's not an outside guy. He's a slot guy. I don't know how well that suits Josh Allen's game. Robert Foster, Zay Jones, John Brown, they're all outside guys that can go get the ball. So it may work out that, I could see a world where in 2019, Josh Allen leads the league in yards per attempt.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add to that. I do think that his rushing alone could jump him higher than 15. And I hope that he can get a little bit better accuracy-wise, but obviously, just like you were saying, that's kind of his biggest question. But he's got probably one of the biggest arms. He's probably just right behind Patrick Mahomes, but he's right there as one of the biggest arms in the game right now. Got some decent weapons on the outside. I'm probably a bigger believer in Singletary than you are, but I don't think it's something that's going to change his fantasy stock much in Allen, that is, at least.
You wouldn't know it by my drafts, but I've got a few shares of Devin Singletary.
So do I. He falls way too late. Like I said, but we've also both been on the train that McCoy is going to get cut. Well, not a lot of people believe that, so... But, like I said, I don't really have much other than add that. Then, you pretty much touched on all the points. Like I said, the only thing for me is I think rushing alone could jump him higher, but I felt like this was a safe spot for him right outside that top 12. I know we're not going to match on the next guy because you've already named him. So who is your number 14?
My number 14 is Mitchell Trubisky.
Okay.
I'm a believer in Mitch continuing to progress. I like Allen Robinson. I like Anthony Miller. I love David Montgomery. I think Shaheen is a nice fallback for when Burton doesn't work out. I think they have a great offensive line in Chicago. And so I think Trubisky is another big guy that can run the ball. So he's got a good rushing floor. They've got Tariq Cohen, who's an excellent pass catcher. So he's got weapons around him that will support him better, I think, than Josh Allen has weapons around him that will support him. So I like Trubisky. I think he's going to take another step this year. And, coming in at 14, I think reflects that.
All right, so for me, 14 is Jameis Winston, a guy you talked about just a couple spots ago. For me, Winston, again, much like I was just talking about with Josh Allen, I think could finish higher. He has the ability to, has a ton of weapons around him, and Howard, Godwin, and then obviously Mike Evans. Backfield's a little sketchy, but again, I don't think that's going to affect his value much. We'll see what Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich decide to do here. I know Byron Leftwich is the offensive coordinator, but I think everybody would be fooling themselves if they don't think Bruce Arians has some kind of hand in the offensive playbook. I do think he's going to be helping Leftwich a little bit with the play calling. So we'll see what happens with Winston. I would not be surprised if he completely just blows out this ranking and ends up in like the top 5, 6, 7, 8. But for right now, I'm going to keep him right outside because I do think if he starts to struggle, they may just move on from him. They have not signed him to a new deal yet. He's literally in a contract year, could become a free agent next year. So we'll see what happens. I do think that alone, though, could propel Winston to finally decide to put it all together because we haven't really seen that with the struggles on and off the field, really. But I do think he finally puts it all together and has another good year for fantasy football. All right, we're almost there. This is the last guy outside of the top tier quarterbacks, the top 12. So who is it? Who for you, Dennis, finishes at 13 right outside that top 12?
Well, for me, my 13th quarterback is sort of has the good combination of rushing floor and good passing, nice weapons around him, and I could see my number 13 quarterback. I could see him finishing top 8 this year. My number 13 quarterback is Dak Prescott.
Okay.
So Prescott has been very consistent. He gets 6 touchdowns rushing every year, about 300 yards on the ground. Amari Cooper, for the struggles he's had, is the best wide receiver that Dak Prescott's ever played with. When Dez was there, Dez was pretty far. Dez had faded pretty good by the time Prescott took over. I think Michael Gallup is an emerging talent, and with Gallup or with Cooper seeing double teams, I think that's going to really open up Gallup on the other side for a good portion of the season to have single coverage. And I think Gallup is going to explode, and that's going to pull the defense away from the line some, which is going to make it convenient for Dak to run, Zeke to run. The Cowboys tight end is a mess. They're going to need Randall Cobb to step up and show that he's healthy and that he can be a slot guy, or else they're going to need somebody else to step up and take that slot job. But I think Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, those are 2 great weapons that I think Dak Prescott will be able to use and he's going to have a career year this year.
All right, so for me, my guy to finish right outside the top 12 is Jared Goff. Obviously, great team around him, made it to the Super Bowl last year, NFC, and made it into the playoffs the year before. Obviously, Sean McVay, highly touted as an offensive genius, and he has not proven anybody wrong with that moniker either. He has done a very good job. Tons of weapons around him. I think going to be a little bit of a struggle this year, especially if Todd Gurley does take a little bit of a step back. We'll see. I could be wrong. Jared Goff, again, another one of those quarterbacks that's looking to try and get a new contract here soon. Could completely outdo this projection. I know he's finished much higher here in the past couple seasons, but I just don't have anybody in my top 12. There's one guy who you actually dropped pretty low, and not Drew Brees, so that might give away who I'm talking about, that I could drop out of my top 13 or top 12 right now, but I've got him up there just because I can't do it right now. I still am a believer in him and that team as much as it bothers me. So Jared Goff, 13 for me. So that's it right there. All those guys, QB2s, we're here. We've reached our top 12. This is the big boys right here. This is guys in fantasy you really, really want. At least probably maybe because they're probably only going to be separated by a couple points here and there. But who right now is your last quarterback in that tier 1 in that top 12?
So my number 12 quarterback has the potential to be a quarterback 1, to be the quarterback 1. He can be top 3. The issue that keeps him from doing that is simply volume, and that's Russell Wilson. Okay. They if they didn't rush the ball 600 times a year, if they threw the ball more, he's got weapons. Tyler Lockett is good. He had Doug Baldwin in the past. He's put up good seasons. His rushing game is going to help, but I think as he's getting older, he's not running as much. And when you have Chris Carson and Rashad Penny in the backfield, you kind of don't have to rush as much. So they've got a really strong running game. Russell Wilson, his running game now is more of, I'm going to get away from pressure and throw the ball down the field. So he's going to need DK Metcalf. He's going to need David Moore. He's going to need Tyler Lockett. He's going to need them to step up and be better receivers. I think that he's very efficient and he's smart with the ball. And I think Tyler Lockett could be in for just a phenomenal year if Moore and Metcalf and the cast of thousands can't step up. They've got some questions at tight end. Is somebody gonna step up and be a consistent receiving threat at tight end? I don't think we know that yet for Seattle. And so that's what lands Russell Wilson at 12 for me.
All right, my number 12 is Big Ben Roethlisberger. He was one I was just talking about there with Jared Goff that I could end up dropping out. He was so good last year. And again, I know he had AB. He did not have Bell, though. So 524 points last year was ridiculous. He also threw the ball a ton. I know. I believe, they attempted 675 throws, which was over 100 more than his next highest. The best other year he had was 2014 with 608. So he threw the ball a lot. Let's just go with that. 5,000 yards. I don't think he does that or anything close to that, obviously. But I do think that
1,000,000 times.
Well, no, I was sitting there. I was going to start cussing, and I was like, "No, don't cuss." And then so it all kind of came jumbled together there. But yeah, so obviously, I don't think he throws for 5,000 yards. I think he probably throws for closer to 4,300, which is still a good year. But I do think he dropped some of the touchdowns not having AB. I'm not as worried about the offense as others are. I do think James Washington is going to be a viable 2 there. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be just fine as the 1 there without AB. And I like the mixture of Connors and Samuels together. They may not throw the ball a lot to Connors, but I do think Samuels can do a lot in the receiving game. Obviously, neither one of them is going to be Le'Veon Bell, but I think together they can bring back somewhat close to that production, which is going to help Big Ben and his fantasy points. So again, right there at 12, still in the top elite for me. Who do you have at number 11?
At number 11, I have got one of my favorite late round fantasy quarterbacks for virtually his entire career. He's just somebody that I've tried to target when I can, especially when I can get a receiver and stack them together. But it's Phillip Rivers. The Chargers throw the ball a lot. They've got a good running game with Gordon. I don't think Gordon holds out very long. I think he'll be back in time to get some work in and start the season. But Gordon catches a lot of balls. They've got Hunter Henry. They've got Mike Williams, and they've got Keenan Allen. So there's a lot of people to catch the ball. And, when you then throw in Austin Eckler, I forget, they brought in somebody as their wide receiver 3, and I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. Taylor Gabriel is there now, I think. But he's been a consistent producer in that, 10 to 15, 10 to 12, 8 to 12 range, and I just feel like that's where he's going to come in again. And so I've got Rivers at 11.
All right. So for me, at 11, I got my guy, Kirky Cousins. I think he did finish his quarterback 9, I think, last year is what it was. So a little bit of a drop for him again. I think this is one guy that I'm dead wrong on. But I just liked everybody ahead of him except for Drew Brees, who I'll just say I have him one spot ahead of him at 8. Kirk Cousins, 449 points last year, his quarterback 9. Second year in this system, they've tried to improve the offensive line a little bit. Obviously, if Dalvin Cook can stay healthy, that is going to help him out a ton. I think the team is going to be, as much as I hate to say this, much better next year. When, my goodness, I can't remember his name. I'll get to him in a minute while I think of his name. But I do think Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are going to continue to ball out. They will have a really good year, at least at the wide receiver position. I can see both finishing in the top 12. So that alone right there is going to get him some points. If he can bring up his rushing production like he showed he could do in Washington, he could jump up even higher as well. Irv Smith is who I was trying to think of. Irv Smith, I think, is what's going to propel them even to a next level next year, because I don't think he's going to do much this year with Kyle Rudolph there, but I can see him taking over and being the tight end one there and give him just another huge dominant threat down in the red zone. Other than that, though, I'm trying to think if I have anything else to add to him, and I don't. So right there for me, 11. Again, he could go higher. I would not be surprised if he just shoots up the board and finishes as probably a top 6 or 7 quarterback. We've seen him do it. He did it almost every single year he was in Washington. This was kind of that first year he really fell down the rankings. And again, I think with him being that second year in the Minnesota offense, he could take a step forward. But I've got him at 11. Who is your number 10 quarterback, Dennis?
Coming in at number 10 for me is Jared Goff. The Rams have an offense that sustains 3 wide receiver 2s, and unfortunately for Gerald Everett, they don't do a lot with the tight end. And Todd Gurley, for everything that's happened during the offseason, I think Todd Gurley is going to be just fine. No, he's not going to get the same number of touches he did last year. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. He's going to get plenty of touches. He's going to still catch a good amount of passes. And then when Gurley's not in there, the running back that is in there, whether it's Brown or Henderson or Kelly, will do just fine. But they're a throw the ball team and give it to their stud running back. So when you've got 3 wide receiver 2s, your quarterback has to be up there somewhere. You can't just, it's, I know I've seen some talk this offseason about how everybody's high on the Buccaneers receivers, but they don't think Goff is going to do well. Or everybody's high on, who was it? San Francisco's receivers, but Jimmy Garoppolo isn't rated very high. And, if your receivers are going to be, if your receivers are putting up points, your quarterback has to put up points. Yeah. So I have Jared Goff at number 10.
All right, so at number 10, I don't know why I said 8. I have Drew Brees. I was not thinking there for a minute. So for me, Drew Brees at 10. He finished as the number 7 quarterback last year with 459 points. The only thing that really worries me about Drew Brees is who is going to step up besides Michael Thomas. I like Ted Ginn. He's going to have his games where he goes off, but he's not at all consistent. Bringing over Jared Cook, I think, was huge for them. I think that's going to help them out a lot. Finally giving him a really good tight end option since Jimmy Graham left, so that might help him out a little bit. But again, Ted Ginn, back to the wide receivers, Ted Ginn, not that consistent. Keith Kirkwood, I'm not a believer in. Traquan Smith had a couple good games, but didn't really do much there either. I was a big believer in Cameron Meredith, but he just can't seem to stay on the field. So outside of Michael Thomas, I don't know who's going to step up and help him give those points. They might lean heavier on the running game like you were talking about earlier, but I don't see that as much because I'm not 100% sold that Alvin Kamara can carry the full workload. And as much as I like Latavius Murray, I think he is more of a guy that you can bring in and give, I would say 8 to 10 touches a game, but not a guy that really can be relied upon that much. I know he had a decent year in Minnesota with Dalvin Cook going down. Just not sure that I see it happening here in New Orleans. But I just can't drop him, man. Drew Brees has just proven it over and over again. I could be wrong. He could finish closer to 20, I think is where you had him. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but I'm going to be that guy who's going to be the last one to jump off the Titanic here because Drew Brees is just so good. I can't doubt him. So I have him at 10 in my rankings. Who do you have at number 9?
I have Brees at 22. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finishes in the top 10. But, that's a different story. At number 9, I have Kirk Cousins.
Okay, gotcha.
I think Cousins is a underrated. He kind of catches a bad rap. He's a decent quarterback, and he's got some really good receiving options. And if Dalvin Cook stays healthy this year, Cook can catch the ball too, and those yards count for Kirk Cousins as well. There is, we need to figure out who the number 3 wide receiver is going to be in Minnesota right now. I guess Chad Beebe has the inside track to it. Kyle Rudolph is he's a end zone guy. So if they start running some 12 personnel, that might get Irv Smith on the field and open up some passing options there, to be kind of the de facto third wide receiver. But I like Cousins to put up top 10 numbers. At number 9, I'm very comfortable with him there.
All right, so for me, mine is Cam Newton. I've got him at 9 here, right? That's where we're at, 9. I'm losing count. So last year he finished at 14 with 410 points. My biggest fear with Cam is the shoulder, which we will see what happens in preseason. Ron Rivera has already come out and said that he's going to be on somewhat of a pitch count with him throwing the ball because they want to make sure that shoulder stays healthy. Love the weapons around him and Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, and Christian McCaffrey, though. You got Greg Olsen, who is on his last leg, but Ian Thomas stepped up and looked good last year. I'm thinking he'll take a step forward this year and prove to be an even better offensive weapon from the tight end position. Love the weapons around him, and then again, he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the game. He's kind of the one who's really come in here since probably Steve Young. I'm probably forgetting someone. Donovan McNabb's another guy. I'm probably forgetting a couple guys in between their era and Cam Newton, but I think he's really revolutionized the running quarterback position, especially with how big he is and how physical he can play the game. Do think that is kind of the reason why he suffered the injuries he suffered. But all that being said, he's a phenomenal athlete, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, so I've got him right up there at 9. Dennis, who do you have at 8?
Well, I don't quibble with your number 9 at all because I have Cam Newton at 8.
Okay, cool.
For all of the very same reasons, he's a short yardage touchdown rushing guy at 6'5", 250. He's got a good arm. He has struggled with accuracy throughout his career, and coming off the shoulder surgery, he's going to need to work to make sure he keeps his shoulder healthy. But you're right. DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Ian Thomas, Christian McCaffrey, he's got a slew of weapons, and they all add up to passing yardage.
Yeah.
So at number 8, Cam Newton is a shoo-in.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to add on all those guys, too, they are yak monsters as well. All those guys, if they make one defender miss in the short area, can take it to the house. So you don't even have to worry necessarily about Cam Newton throwing the deep ball as well, because all 3 of those guys can do damage after they make the catch. For me, my number 8 is Russell Wilson. Finished as QB 10 last year with 439 points. I don't disagree with some of the stuff Dennis was saying earlier on them trying to lean heavier on the run game and defense. I mean, that's kind of what Seattle has been based on. The one thing that worries me about that is their offensive line still sucks, in my opinion. So I think Russell Wilson is going to have to run around a little bit more for his life. Love the weapons they have. Again, I'm one of those guys who's a bigger believer in DK Metcalf than others. I think him and Tyler Lockett on the outside are going to give Russ the ability to throw the ball deep. Again, another reason why he's up here is his rushing yards. He does a really good job of getting rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Kind of actually dipped a little bit compared to the year prior. 376 yards last year, 586 the year prior. I think he's going to get more than 300, but not 500, if that may. I've got him right around the 420 range, and I've got him with a couple touchdowns as well in the rushing game. But the other thing that I love about Russ is he rarely throws interceptions. His touchdown to interception ratio has been ridiculous outside of his rookie year where he threw 26 and 10. I think he's going to do the same thing this year. Multiple years of single-digit interceptions, and that's going to help him. And I do think he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns as well, probably over 30. That's kind of been his trend the past couple years. I think that continues. So Russell Wilson is up there at 8 for me. Who do you have at number 7?
Number 7, I have Matt Ryan.
Whoa!
Yeah, I think the return of...
Dude, we got it again.
We matched again?
Yeah, we matched again.
Right on. All right.
All right, now you can give all the analysis so I can just sit back and relax, so go ahead.
You know, what analysis is there to give? He's got Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Mohamed Sanu, Austin Hooper, the good pass-catching running back, and Devontae Freeman. So, I think he was QB2 last year, so we're probably selling him short at QB7.
Yeah, he was. So he finished QB2 with 531 points. The only reason I dropped him this far is there's one guy, and it's going to hurt my heart to say it, it's Baker. Baker I do have ahead of him. Obviously, I would imagine you do as well. There's no way he's outside of your top 24. So Baker is the only guy on this list I would consider dropping below him, based purely on what we've seen Matt Ryan do throughout his career. The one thing I'll say is, and he has done it a lot, in throwing over 600 times, which is what we were talking about with Big Ben. So he threw 608 times last year, which was a little bit of a departure from what he had done the couple years prior with 529 and 534. But again, it's his touchdown to interception ratio, much like Russell Wilson's, I think that separates him from the pack. 35-7 last year, 38-7 in 2016. Not so good in 2017, 20, and 12, but still, that I think is going to be the thing. You just touched on a lot of great weapons around him. Hopefully, guys, Devontae Freeman coming back will stay healthy all year. I think the defense is going to be better, which is why I gave him a little bit of a knock. They've got a lot of guys coming back that are going to be healthy. So I don't think they're going to be in as many shootouts as they were this year. I don't think he's going to get as many garbage time points as he did last year, just trying to throw the Falcons back into the game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit more. So that was the biggest reason why I dropped him. But I would not disagree with you. We might be selling him a little bit short, having him at 6. But again, the guys that I have that we're about to go over here, Baker is the only one that I might drop below him. But with his weapons, it's just so hard to do. So... Because
it's one of those situations where I look at the names in front of him and I feel like if I'm predicting, I'm going to predict he's going to finish here. If he finishes 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't surprise me. And they did invest 2 relatively high draft picks in offensive linemen this year as well. So, they're trying to take care of him and make sure he stays healthy.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the only reason for me, the reason I have Baker up there, and we'll discuss it more when we get to Baker, but it's just I think his weapons around him are better than what Matt Ryan has. Like, if you want to debate Odell Julio, I would still probably say, based on what Julio's done, you take Julio over Odell, but then I think I would take every single other weapon in Cleveland over what Matt Ryan has, and Njoku Hooper I think is somewhat of a wash at that point. So that for me, then that gives Baker the semi-edge because I think their offensive lines are comparable as well. But he's the only one. So now that we've discussed that, let's get into our top 5. Who do you have at number 5?
I'm at number 6.
I'm sorry, 6. You're right. My bad. I want to talk about top 5, but I guess we can discuss 6 really quick.
My number 6 is Carson Wentz.
Oh, my God. We're on a roll. We're on a roll. Let's keep it going. Keep it going. Let's go.
All right. I did the Matt Ryan. You give the Carson Wentz analysis.
Okay. Well, I think Carson Wentz, I don't know if anybody listens to Louis Riddick. He has been on this train longer than I have, so I'll give him props on that. I think Carson Wentz has a chance to be MVP of the league this year. We've talked about it on this podcast. He was the MVP of the league a couple years ago in the Eagles Super Bowl run before he blew out his knee. They've just added more weapons around him. Love Miles Sanders, one of the best offensive lines in the game. You've got Alshon Jeffrey if he can stay healthy. JJ Arcega-Whiteside on the outside. You've got now Deshaun Jackson who can take the top off the defense. You have one of the best tight ends in the league in Zach Ertz, and then you add Dallas Goedert on there. He's got weapons all over the place. He is a guy who's not afraid to fling it. He will throw to the open receiver or tight end. I just love the offense that Doug Peterson runs there. You got a good defense that I think is going to keep them in almost every single game. And I just don't think, depending on what happens with Miles Sanders, we haven't seen him really do anything in camp yet because he hasn't been healthy. I think they're going to rely more on passing the ball than running the ball because I don't believe in Jordan Howard. And they do love to throw the ball to the backs, which Corey Clement and Miles Sanders are both phenomenal receiving backs as well. In my opinion, Miles Sanders did not do it a lot at Penn State, but I think that's just because they didn't use him in that game. So Carson Wentz just has so many weapons around him, and I think he is so good. The only question, and I mean, it's literally the only question I have for Wentz is can he stay healthy for 16 games? If he can stay healthy for 16 games, I would not be surprised if he finishes in the top 3, top 2. I don't know if he can get to 1, but I would not be surprised even if he did that if he stays healthy. Do you have anything to add?
I don't. That was a beautiful analysis.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I worked hard on it. All right. Now we're to the top 5 because I'm excited. These are the top 5 guys. I'm really interested to see how close we finish up with these top 5 because I feel like 1 and 2 are probably going to be different just based on prior conversations we've had. And I feel like 5 and 4 might be the same. So who do you have at 5?
I have Aaron Rodgers at number 5.
Shit. No, we're wrong. Okay. All right, go ahead. Go give me the breakdown on Rodgers.
Well, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. He's an exceptional quarterback. He knows how to play the position, but he's going to be playing in a new offense for the first time in his career. He has Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. Their tight end is still a mess. I don't think their tight end position will be very productive. I love Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I take Scantling over Geronimo Allison just about every single time. I think Equanimous St. Brown is going to provide some deep speed on the outside as well when he gets in there. So they've got some talent at wide receiver, and I think they're going to put up some points, and they're going to throw the ball. It's a situation of what kind of games will they be in? They're going to be playing in outside in the winter, in December. They're going to have a little more reason to run the ball when it gets a little later in the season, and I think that might affect some of his numbers. Baker's going to be in that same situation. So, I think that Rodgers' volume is going to take just a slight dip, maybe. Not a ton. I'm not expecting him to throw, 100 fewer passes. But I could see a world where, maybe his touchdowns are down a little bit because Aaron Jones hits like so many of us think he's gonna. Yeah. So if Jones is scoring touchdowns instead of Rodgers throwing them, those points are going somewhere else.
All right, so for me at 5, I've got Deshaun Watson. I have him finishing exactly where he finished last year with 471 points. I think that the biggest thing for me and why I'm giving him a little bit of a downtick is I don't think his rushing yards are going to be there as much. If I take that back, his passing yards, I don't know what I'm thinking. Rushing yards are going to be there because the offensive line sucks. And Lamar Miller, I don't think is that good. I think he's going to continue to take a step back. They're not going to have much of a running game, so I think That is going to force him to throw the ball a lot. We need Will Fuller to stay healthy. I do like Kiki Kuti, though. I think he could take a step forward. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is arguably the best wide receiver in the league. So I do think he's going to still put up phenomenal numbers, just not quite what he did last year with the 4,000 passing and 551 rushing. I think he's going to fall just a little bit short, and both of those still have a phenomenal year. I just think all the guys I have ahead of them are going to be a little bit better. Who do you have at number 4?
The aforementioned Deshaun Watson.
Okay. Right.
I agree mostly with what you are saying. I do think Jordan Thomas is a highly underrated tight end, so there is some potential for Thomas to get some red zone work. You know, he's a big dude. He's going to be on the field. He's a good blocker. Okay athleticism. If Will Fuller can stay healthy, he puts up points. He puts up yards. And when Fuller's on the field, it does open up the field for DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins is a full-grown man out there.
Yeah.
And you know, when that ball is in the air, it's his ball, and he's going to catch it. So I feel like Watson is going to put up some big numbers again this year. I can see his rushing yards going down. I probably like Deontay Foreman a little more than you, and Lamar Miller is perpetually disrespected. But true. Miller is a decent back as well.
Yeah, I don't think Miller is a bad back. He's slowly been degressing the past couple years, and I think that's going to continue to look even worse this year. He's been a running back too, pretty much his entire career, or at least right there in the 13-24 range. He's very consistent with that. So I'm not trying to say that he's a bad back. I just think he's going to continue to regress a little bit as he has been the past couple years. For me at 4, I have Aaron Rodgers, who you had at 5. I agree with everything you said. My biggest thing is Aaron Jones. How are they going to lean on him more? Because if they do that, it's going to take some of it away from Rodgers. But I love his weapons there. Obviously, Devontae Adams, I think, is right there in the argument with Hopkins as the best wide receiver in the league. You got Geronimo Allison, MVS, Equanimous St. Brown. All these guys are phenomenal athletes.
Good job.
Obviously, we don't. What would I do right?
You've been practicing his name, have you?
I've been practicing everybody's name, even Noah Fant, and I still always want to say Fonts. It messes me up. I get very frustrated when I do that, so you have no idea. But anyways, my only question is I don't know what kind of offense Matt LaFleur is going to come in here and run. So if Aaron Rodgers is going to abide by it, I guess is the way to put it. We obviously have heard all the talks about what he used to do with Mike McCarthy. Is he going to change the play calls to do whatever he wants? We'll see. But my biggest thing to it with just Matt LaFleur is exactly what you said. I just mentioned too. Aaron Jones, he's a phenomenal back. If they lean on him more, that's going to take some of the passing touchdowns away from Rodgers. So I think that's going to drop him just a bit, but still finishing as number 4. That's a very good quarterback. So I already know we're going to match on number 3 because there's no way you have him in your top 2. So go ahead. Give Bake Show the love because I know that's who you've got at 3. So go ahead, talk about Mr. Baker Mayfield.
You know, I have Baker at number 3. Yeah. I just feel like he's the second coming of Drew Brees when it comes to accuracy. He's got a good arm. He's mobile. He can get out of trouble. He doesn't look to run. He will run, but he doesn't look to run. He can get the ball down the field. And he's got OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway, Rashard Higgins, David Njoku, and Nick Chubb, and Duke Johnson, and Kareem Hunt. You know, he has an arsenal. I think probably the biggest thing Baker is going to have to overcome is going to be how good Cleveland's defense is. Because if they're up by 2 touchdowns by the end of the first quarter, and then they're up 3 touchdowns, and if they're up 24 by halftime, you know, it's easy to say we're going to keep our foot on the gas, but you're gonna do things to run the clock out. instead of throwing outs at the sideline, you're throwing ins at the sideline where they're not going out of bounds and you're keeping the clock running. Those type of things I think will affect his overall ability to be the QB1. If the defense breaks down a little bit, Baker Mayfield is more than happy to get out there and wing it down the field and throw the ball 50 or 60 times to try to win the game. So I like Baker. I like everything he's brought to the Browns. So he's my QB3.
Yeah, for me as well. And just to touch on what you were saying, I agree with you. The defense is a little bit of a worrisome thing for me because if they are able to keep teams, to that 14 to 21 point range, you're not going to have Baker throwing the ball as much as he was last year. I do think that they would still keep their foot on someone's throat, but we could be wrong. We know the way that Baker is, and I think that Freddie Kitchens is very much the same way as Baker. He just doesn't get the publicity that Baker gets because he's not quite as outspoken, I guess, as Baker is, or he's not as loud as Baker is. The one thing I will say, and it does worry me a little bit, is Baker's interceptions all the way back to college because he's not afraid to throw the ball. He will throw a lot of interceptions, which might keep the other teams in it, especially if you're playing a good offense. You give, just go back to the guy we just talked about, Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson. You give those guys the ball more often than they're supposed to get it. They're going to put up more points, which means Baker's going to have to continue to throw to stay in the game. And I do think now, too, with all the talk that Cleveland is getting this offseason and going into the season, though Cleveland isn't doing it. That's the one thing I want to point out, because a lot of people want to sit here and say everybody needs to pump the brakes on the Browns hype train. The Browns are not the one doing it. We don't see Odell, Jarvis, Baker, Freddie, all those guys going out there and saying we're going to win the Super Bowl. It is the media and blowhards like myself pumping up the Browns. So we should just calm down on saying the Browns are doing this because they're not. But I do think the Browns are going to get everybody's best shot because of the way everybody is kind of making them the Super Bowl darlings and the new America's team and everything. I do think most teams are going to come out and kind of want to hit Cleveland in the mouth, and that's where I think Baker is going to thrive and really want to shove it down people's throats. Just go back to the Cincinnati games after Hugh Jackson left. I mean, there was a point where the Browns were up in that game and they were still just chucking the ball because they wanted to put up points. And then Cincinnati did end up coming back and making it a closer game.
That was against Cincinnati, though. I mean,
well, true.
Hugh Jackson was down there, so
right. But that's my point.
There might have been just a touch of incentive there.
My point
to rub Hugh's nose in it
is I think Baker is going to want to do that to everybody, though, because he's going to find that bulletin board material. He's that guy who's going to find even the slightest thing that you said and turn it around against you, and it's going to fire him up. That's what I love about him. I'm not going to lie. I love the way that he can do that. He's got, like Tom Brady. Tom Brady still uses that 6th-round draft pick as a chip on his shoulder to just kind of shove it in everybody's face. He still talks about it, and that's what I love. The guys that can continually provide that spark and that chip on their shoulder for something like that. And I could see that happening. All it takes is for someone to come out and say one wrong thing, and Baker's like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you. And so that's why I think that they're still going to try and shove the ball down everybody's throat. But I could be wrong. That's what I'm saying. Now, you could be right on that, and that might dwindle his numbers some. But I just think with the weapons that they have on offense, they're not going to – Nick Chubb's not going to run the ball every time he's on the field. He's going to get some catches. You still have Duke there. You got Kareem Hunt when he comes back. They'll throw the ball to the running backs. You've got all those great wide receivers. They're going to put up a ton of points, and Baker's going to be the recipient of that because all those guys are going to put up points. So Baker is 3 for me as well. This is where it's going to be interesting because I do feel like this is where we're going to be flip-flop just based on what we've talked about in the past, but I could be wrong. So who do you have it to?
I have Pat Mahomes at number 2.
Yeah, so we did flip-flop. All right, so tell me why you got Patty at 2.
So I'm on the Pat Mahomes is going to regress train.
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like even what I expect him to regress to is good enough to be a QB1. It would have still been QB1 last year at 40 touchdowns and 4,500 yards instead of 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. So, he's going to regress, but he's not. It isn't like he's going to go from 50 touchdowns to 18 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. No, he's still going to have an exceptional year, and the fact that he isn't going to lose Tyreek is huge. But it's more a function of what I expect my QB1 to do, which is to take a big step forward. Last year, and I know my one is your two, so let's just talk about the two of them in conjunction here.
Okay.
So I have Andrew Luck at one.
Yeah.
And last year, after Luck came off his injury, the Colts did something that in years that they haven't done. They said, we're going to go out and we are going to invest in our offensive line.
Yeah. Well,
and they have built a powerful offensive line. And now they've said, okay, now that we've got the offensive line, now we're going to get Andrew some more weapons to go along with T.Y. Hilton. So they brought in Funchess, there can be a debate as to whether or not he's a weapon. Ebron was great last year. Doyle is going to be healthy this year. Marlon Mack flashed when he was healthy. I'm expecting a really good year out of Marlon Mack. They brought in Spencer Ware, who will be a capable backup. Nyheim Hines caught 63 passes last year. And they did I say they drafted Paris Campbell?
Not yet. They got Campbell.
So he is surrounded by weapons. And the one thing that Indianapolis doesn't do quite as well is they don't invest a ton of money in their defense. They look for guys that can kind of keep the game close enough that our quarterback can win it. So I expect Luck to take a step forward while Mahomes drops back a little bit, and I just expect it to be enough for Luck to be the number one and Mahomes to be the number two. I've had him that way all off season in my expectations, and I don't have, nobody's made a case for me other than I just like this guy better, or I've projected it this way. Okay, you've projected it that way. That's great. It could happen.
Yeah.
It could happen. Sure. But this is how I see it playing out.
So we've had this discussion before on the podcast, and I even said that I would not be surprised if Luck finished one. And I had Luck one until we found out Tyreek was not getting the 4-game suspension. That was huge for me because Tyreek Hill is just such a difference maker for that offense. Out of all of the weapons that both teams have, I think altogether Luck has the better weapons around him. But Patrick Mahomes has the two best players on his team in Kelsey and Hill. I would not take any of Luck's weapons that he has around him over those two. However, the rest of the weapons I would probably take next over anybody else Kansas City has. So, I would take, I guess, would you take Watkins or Ebron?
I don't think it's, I don't know. I'd probably take Watkins over Ebron.
Okay. All right, so then you have one other guy there, because I know you take Marlon Mack and probably Nyheim Hines over Damian Williams, or would you put Williams over Hines?
My stubbornness would probably take Hines.
I don't think that's a bad call. I really don't.
I'm big on Mack. I'm not big on Williams.
Yeah.
Though I'm certainly not selling my one share of Williams. I have it at discount.
I gotcha. Well, yeah, so that's my point, is that altogether, I think we would both agree that Luck has the better team around him, better offense, better weapons outside of Hill and Kelsey. He's got more depth of weapons, I guess is the way to put it, where on Kansas City, the only guys you would trust really are Hill and Kelsey. A lot of people like Williams. We've only seen half a year of him, though. So I don't know if I like Williams. I think he's a good playmaker. I'm not sold that he's going to be what he was for that half season. I do think he'll take a step back as well. My next point on the defense is Kansas City's defense was even worse than Indianapolis's last year by a wide margin, and Indianapolis doesn't invest in their defense. Now, I know Kansas City made a couple of moves on defense. They brought over Frank Clark. I don't know how much of a difference he's going to make, though. For me, their defense is just still going to be one of the worst. It's going to force Mahomes to throw the ball more. I agree with you, he's going to take a step back. There's no doubt in my mind he's probably going to go down to 38 to 40 touchdowns. My last thing that separated him for me is that while Andrew Luck is I would say right up there close to what Mahomes can do throwing-wise. Luck throws a ton more interceptions than what we've seen out of Patrick Mahomes. I know it's only been 1 year, and he threw 12 interceptions, but Andrew Luck is like consistently up in like the 15 to 17 interception ratio there. So for me, all the leagues that I play in, you get negative points for interception. So that was what dipped him just a smidge under Patrick Mahomes for me, is because while I expect him to both throw close to 40 touchdowns, probably close to the same amount of yardage, I think the interception difference is what gives Mahomes just the slight edge over Luck. I have no argument against anybody who wants to have Luck number one, because that would not surprise me one bit. Like I said, we've had this discussion before, and really up until the news of Tyreek Hill earlier, I think it was last week or earlier this week, him not getting the 4-game suspension, that's what moved Mahomes back up to one for me, because it gave him that versatile weapon down the field that he didn't have up until that news broke. So, like I said, no argument against it. I would not be surprised if Luck finishes one there for me, but I've got Mahomes a fingernail above Andrew Luck, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
All right, well, that right there is going to do it for our quarterback rankings. Again, we'll do this again as we get closer to the season in case there are any injuries, and we'll solidify kind of what we think is going to happen in the year once we start getting through some of these preseason games. This is what we've got ranked right now for our preseason ranks, so hit us up on Twitter. I mentioned both of our handles at the beginning, but you can find me at SportsFanaticMB, and you can find Dennis at Culture_Coach. Tell us who you think is lower, or you think is higher than we have, or who you think we should drop down. I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of Baker hate for having him up there at number 3. A lot of people want him lower than that, and that part of it is what it is. But Dennis, before we cut out of here, let everybody know what you've got going on at Nerd Herd and anything else you've got going on.
I'm just updating my rankings over Dynasty Nerds on the Nerd Herd. I'm getting ready to hop in the rookie rankings. I've been just doing the standard rankings, so I'm going to add the rookie rankings to my portfolio. We've got some great articles we're working on. One from you coming up about the Devy running backs. I just got to finish editing that and get that in the queue, so that should be out in a day or two. I'm excited about the role as the editor there for Dynasty Nerds, and I'm super excited about the 2 live events we've got coming up there. Yeah. The Midwest Fantasy Football Expo at www.midwestffexpo.com. You can get your tickets are $20, but when you sign up, if you use coupon code KNIGHTS, KNIGHTS, you'll get $5 off your admission. And then I hope to go out and win that $50,000 grand prize in the World Championship event I'm going to enter. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's going to be a lot of fun. So as Dennis touched on, I have the article that I've been talking about is finally able to finish getting all of my stuff ready and my breakdowns done. I've got my 10 through 6 article coming out here, and then my 1 through 5 is done as well. That will be releasing probably sometime next week. I want to try and give each one a little bit of time to breathe, and then my quarterbacks for college will be coming up next. So that'll be kind of my breakdown. I'll be hopefully releasing one a week up until the college football season, all my top Devy and college prospects to watch for the 2019 season. Guys, thank you so much for listening to us today. We will be back on Monday with our running back rankings. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you guys get a minute. It helps us out a lot, and it means a lot to us. Again, if you guys have constructive criticism, you guys can always hit us up on Twitter as well. As we talked about, any fantasy football questions, jump into our DMs, let us know, or again, just give us a shout on Twitter. We'd be happy to help you guys. And other than that, Dennis, have yourself a good weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday.
Right on.
Prepare for glory! I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
At Kohl's Friends and Family Sale, the back-to-school savings add up with an extra 20% off. Save on Skechers for the family, girls' stretch jeggings just $12, and save on an Instant Pot and luggage. Plus, take an extra 10% off home. Plus, everyone gets Kohl's Cash. Plus, free Amazon returns now at all Kohl's stores. This weekend at Kohl's. Offers valid July 25th through 28th. 20% with promo code SHOPFAMILY. 10% off home with promo code HOMEDEAL10. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.